When one mentions film score or soundtrack, typically what comes to mind is the works of more contemporary composers like the famous John Williams, Hans Zimmer, or Howard Shore. It is worth noting that although these composers truly are wonderful, they did not birth this genre, and it's actually older than most people understand. There are many examples of composers that we refer to as classical contributing masterworks to film scores as early as Camille Saint-Saëns, although the most notably prolific and influential in the genre include Dmitri Shostakovich, Sergei Prokofiev, and Ralph Vaughan Williams. These works did fluctuate in scale, but nevertheless the composers had translated their artistry to the silver screen. As cinema was gaining traction, these composers saw a new medium to be involved in and convey their art without totally abandoning their concert setting. The multi-episode presentation you are about to observe explores a particular film score done by Sergei Prokofiev to the 1938 film Alexander Nevsky, directed by Sergey Eisenstein. In this first episode, we will be exploring Socialist Realism and a legendary collaboration. It's an uncomfortable fact knowing that any given time there's censorship and unjust filtering of art somewhere out there in the world. Even though creative output can be stifled by heavy censorship, some masterworks slip through the cracks without losing artistry. In the year 1917, after the Socialist October Revolution, creative output in the Soviet Union was forced to change for a few decades until roughly the mid-1980s. On their way to becoming a superpower, the Soviet government was pushed for a nationalist regime amongst its people. Any work that was pessimistic, didn't support the Soviet Union, or showcased too many ideals from other nationalities was silenced and removed from canon, regardless of the medium. To simplify, the Soviet government wanted to promote hyper-patriotism and boost morale amidst its people. Lenin has made the following claim: "Art belongs to the people. It must penetrate with its deepest roots into the very thick of the broad working masses. It must be understandable by these masses and loved by them. It must unite the feeling, thought, and will of these masses, inspire them. It must awaken in them artists and develop them." Although the works were creatively held hostage by the state, the country saw a rise in government funding in support of the arts. Concert halls and operas were supported by the government. Composers received commissions from Stalin himself, and music became a requirement in public schooling. All around, music was being made more accessible and a larger part of the culture. The vast majority of the music being created was joyful, lacked unresolved dissonances, and directly references past Russian culture in the form of neo-romanticism and neoclassicism. After the October Revolution, Prokofiev had left the country to travel the world, finding homes in the United States, Germany, and France. It's uncertain whether he was truly leaving the country just to pursue a better career in the US, or if he saw what was to come soon in Soviet censorship. His letters and public statements always say that he loved his nation and was proud of their ideals, but it's worth noting that his career was essentially being held hostage most of his life, as his music would be discarded and he could be charged as an enemy of the state if he ever spoke out against the regime. Now, he died while the Soviet Union was going strong, so we never got to see his true beliefs in this regard. Prokofiev, while in America, was offered a job as a full-time film composer, but he turned it down in favor of returning to the Soviet Union, as he had been notified of his music becoming very popular. Upon the return to his homeland, Prokofiev was banned from ever leaving in 1939. Now, when he did return back to the Soviet Union, the reason why he traveled there in the first place was because he was essentially told that his career was taking off there and that he was getting immense popularity, but it was really just kind of a ploy for the government to lure him over and then trap him so that they could have a nationalist icon for themselves. After his return, Prokofiev was given many opportunities and commissions across different mediums, such as opera, concert writing, and film scores. With a rise in funding to both music and cinema, Stalin thought it would be a wonderful idea to see a collaboration between the esteemed composer Sergei Prokofiev and the film directing mastermind Sergey Eisenstein. This collaboration turned into the 1938 film Alexander Nevsky, and focuses on the titular character and his struggle to defend Novgorod against the Teutonic Knights of the invading Roman Catholic Empire during the 13th century. Like other contemporary works during the time, this piece focused on Russian-Soviet history and was intended to strengthen the cultural backbone of the rising superpower. Stalin loved the finished product so much that Eisenstein was gifted the Order of Lenin and the Stalin Prize, which are two of the highest honors a Soviet can receive. A modern comparison of this legendary collaboration can be likened to John Williams and Steven Spielberg, Alan Silvestri and Robert Zemeckis, Howard Shore and Peter Jackson. Prokofiev and Eisenstein worked very closely on this film and appreciated the artistry of one another's medium. Prokofiev would go as far as to compose music to the edited product, making sure that things were lined up perfectly, and Eisenstein in return would occasionally edit the product to Prokofiev's score. The film they created would go on to be one of the most influential films and film scores of all time, influencing such classics as Mulan and The Empire Strikes Back, as well as many battles from, say, Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, anything that's medieval fantasy, essentially. In the next part of this project, we'll be diving into how this masterpiece was composed, including composing techniques, orchestration techniques, and taking an overall dive into the themes and leitmotifs that Prokofiev had used to create this masterwork.